My name is Chris Richardson. I work for Infoblox Federal. I support federal civilian agencies, but I also act as a point person on the cross-sector information exchange programs around collective cyber threat defense. And one of those programs is the Automated Indicator Sharing Program from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And so sometimes I find myself swerving back into the private sector lane, and that's okay. This is about our organization learning from threats that targeted you an hour ago, and being able to proactively increase and enhance our cyber resilience and our cybersecurity posture that way. Sounds simple enough. The easiest things are sometimes the most difficult to get done. My goals today are to sort of walk you through AIS, where we have been, what's in the package, why is it of value, how does it make your day better, what sort of size and scope are we talking about here, the different ways that you can consume this data and put it into play in your environment, removing hassle, removing the overhead cost that sometimes is associated with taking fire hoses of data and then having to figure out what to do with them. Infoblox has been thinking about this for a long time. It's something that fits into our overall security efforts about opening up information to your security environment, putting the information that you need, where you need it, how you need it, and then a little bit about the future. I want to talk about the road ahead and sort of what are our goals with the program. And so by the end of this, you'll have more of a familiarity with the AIS program and what you can do with that juxtaposed with Infoblox solutions and capabilities. And of course, we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. If you have those, please use the Q&A window to queue those up, and I'll answer them as best I can. So I've personally been involved with these kinds of efforts dating back to 2012. We had Birds of a Feather sessions at what's called the G1st conference. A lot of hands banging on the table, people saying perfect is the enemy of good, let's get the bird out of the nest. People yelling at the government, you're the government, do something. Everybody wanted threat intelligence, but who wants to share it? Well, now all the hands go back down. Lots of people have worked on these efforts, and there's been a variety of efforts over the years to come up with common community standards around threat indicator sharing. How would I take these indicators, put them into play? Do I trust them? Is it credible data? Is it contextualized? Oh, I have to pay to play? Well, then I have to contribute. Does that mean I got to run it through the general counsel of all these issues, these political, economic, operational, and technical barriers? Lots of people worked hard over the years to say, how can we overcome this as a community? How can I learn from the threats that targeted you an hour ago, and vice versa, right? And so I think as time wore on, Congress finally made a move and gave sort of safe harbor liability protection to private sector companies in the legislation that was passed in 2015. President Obama issued Executive Order 13636, I believe. Leaders in our industry were calling for aggressive information exchange. We have to get better about responding to the threat faster as a community. All of these efforts started to put wind in the sails, and through the efforts of forward-looking people like Richard Struess at DHS, some folks who worked hard at MITRE, they have what you know today as STIX taxi incident exchange formats. That DHS said, what can we do to make it easier? And we were asking the same question at IID and Infoblox all along. What can we do to add value? And put very simply, how can we increase the quality of this data? 1-2 years ago, a lot of the feedback I was getting, well, these indicators are stale, and there's not very many of them, quite frankly. So what we did at Infoblox was we said, how can we help on that? We contributed some of our own original threat intelligence, some of the spam bots that our team is finding, some phishing URLs, things that the community would need to know sort of on a near-term basis. And then we started to ask that second question. How do we add value in terms of making this easier to use? Right? So for the longest time, you've had to go to the effort of standing up a taxi server, configuring it, making sure that it can talk to other taxi servers out there. And certainly a lot of people have worked hard on that. I don't begrudge those efforts at all. Where we're coming from is trying to be complementary to what you already have set up throughout your security environment. I'll talk about the ecosystem play as it relates to AIS in a few minutes. But what we did was we said, well, I think there's a way we can normalize, we can deduplicate, we can put this data into packages that are easier to engage, right, that people can get going. So it's not necessarily a 3 to 6 month project. I'm looking to make it a 3 to 6 minute project. That's kind of where my head is at. We're always trying to find ways, what can we do to make this easier? How can we help grow this program? It's certainly vibrant. Hundreds of organizations are participating in AIS. There are other programs out there that have similar objectives. There isn't necessarily one ring to rule them all, as it were. The idea is, let's make it cost-free, let's make it easy, let's remove the barriers. And a lot of times AIS data is listed in the articles you might find out there in your research around what are the top 10 ways to get started with threat intelligence programs. What are easy ways, easy feeds I can get my hands on today to put into play in my enterprise, to formulate use cases around. AIS consistently comes up as one of the top ways to do that. Let's talk a little bit about just volume, right? So since October of 2016, you can see, and I'm sorry, it looks like my formatting on the volumes messed up there a little bit. My apologies. You can see IP addresses are an order of magnitude more than URLs and host names right now. So I've got some ideas about that, about what we can do to contribute back, to maybe engage other partners that we have who also participate in AIS, and throttle up the numbers there a little bit. But that said, on the IP address front, just in March, there were over 189,000. So that's more than double the average over time. So the numbers are trending up, and you might sit there and say, well, these don't knock my socks off. But remember where this came from. This all started as a bunch of smart people yelling at each other and not much getting done. So you've got a program here. Again, it's a scalable, sort of flexible, community-based approach that says, you know what, give me that data that I need to know what malicious external threat locations shouldn't I be reaching out to? Or if I am, I want to at least be able to alert on that and then proceed accordingly. As far as ways to consume AIS data in ActiveTrust, this is one of the things I'm most excited about. It's not just another fire hose that goes into another siloed bucket. You can consume this data in 3 easy ways. Number one is, of course, as response policy zone files for your secure DNS resolver. And we've been conservative in how we build these RPZ feeds because, again, this is community-based threat intelligence. It has a propensity to be a little dirtier. But that said, we apply some normalization. We do a little bit of filtering on it. A customer recently reached out to me and said, thank you. I got google.com in this data through somebody else, but you guys filtered that out. Much appreciated. You have to apply things like that if you want to make it machine readable. And if you want these programs to scale and grow, So we're doing our part there to add some infrastructure around it and say, you know what, a lot of people just set it and forget it, set it to block and move on. That's why we were judicious in how we created the RPZ feeds. They don't contain the entire set of data that we get. Primarily, they're purpose-built for DNS resolvers. So for example, right now, they don't include port scanning IPs. It wouldn't make sense to put a port scanning IP in a DNS resolver, of course, but that seems to be the #1 threat class that people share with these efforts. And there's other efforts like CyberFed, different models that are out there that are federated. Everybody seems to have a good view into port scanning IPs. No big deal if you share that. That doesn't come back around to bite you. Those seem to have a nice, let's call it an equitable street value where people can share those things, right? But there are other threat classes in this. Of course, there are phishing domains and URLs, other types of spam bots, other kinds of things that the analysts at the United States government have put onto watch lists to say if we have other agencies who are going to this particular site, then that's it. You know, based on our rules and our signatures and our criteria, we'll go ahead and block it. Or they want to keep the fish on the line and track threat actors' activities. Well, now you can use AIS to piggyback off of that. It's a simple tide feed. It's a self-replenishing feed. There's actually one call. If you have an API key in ActiveTrust Tide, there's one API call that does it all. I'll post that in the Q&A window here in a few minutes. You can just start to get this data and get it flowing. There's no overhead in terms of upfront build or figuring out, well, how does this relate to other projects that we have going on? Should we put it in the central repository? Should I put it in the SIM? You know, you can pull this data in a CSV format or JSON or common event format as you like for your SIM, for example. The third use case is in our dossier search engine. That is an interesting one. Customers are using this as a way to catch up on the backlog that's in their SIM. So for example, if you're getting 3,000 alerts a day and you only have capacity to get to 1,000, of course you're hoping you get to the right 1,000. That means you've got a stack of 2,000 things that you didn't get to there. Well, now you can set up a job to make API calls to dossier and get the additional context around that. If there's an intersection with the data that's in the AIS set in that stack of backlog, well, now you know it's something that maybe you need to take a look at, prioritize that up. And again, dossier is going to tell you if AIS had it and it's a new domain name and it's a registrar with a poor reputation, well, that's enough to make a decision right then and there. Or if FireEye's iSight team had it and CrowdStrike had it, and now you see that AIS Program has it, you have more context there. You can just make a decision around that. A little bit more here. Sorry for this is visual overload. Just giving you kind of what's in the package, right? So in the upper left and the lower right, you see an example of a record, right, with all of the fields, the full context, so that you can pull that into your systems, make the right decision the first time quickly, program your rules, program your prioritization as needed. And when we look at that one up in the upper left there, you take that indicator, you search on it in dossier, you use our system to do that, not your public IP space, and you see it relates to some URLs that have triggered in antivirus engines over the past 3 months. Again, within a few minutes, you can get some context there and make a decision around something that you had no idea about a few minutes ago. And so AIS is one of those sets that you can just get going quickly, right? There's no cost to this data. We've signed the paperwork on your behalf. Just getting back to the model here of our approach. This is as simple as I can put it. We want to push the envelope on both of these fronts, right? And we don't always hit the mark, but we need you as customers to let us know, where are we falling down? Where's room for improvement? Where can we be better? Zooming out a little bit, I wanted to just talk about our ecosystem, how AIS relates to that. And though we've got some awesome partnerships here with end-to-end integrations, it is about that, but it's about the fact that we open up our system so that you can put this data where you need to. And there's two key events, really, that I like to highlight. Number one is a new device has joined the network. You can take that data, put it where you need to, build a foundation of having a real-time, accurate inventory of what devices are on your network mapped to what internal IP addresses, so that you can get more value out of a SIM or a network access controller or a vulnerability scanner, right? The other key event, of course, is a device made a DNS query to a known bad location in one of our data sets, right? A DNS firewall hit, as it were, including the AIS data, right? You can now automatically transport that information, and you want to capture the whole package, the device, the MAC address, the timestamp, and what threat did it reach out to, what was the threat class, the property around that indicator, and you can put that into EDR systems, tell the EDR kill the related process wherever else it's running on the network, do threat containment that way. Of course, you can make API calls into Splunk and things like that. Tell your network access controller, hey, something just reached out to something that hundreds of government analysts have rated as bad. Infoblox thinks it's bad. Let's go ahead and quarantine that device. It's up to you, right? This is your security environment. The information has to be fluid enough that you can put it where you need to. And so, again, that's kind of what I like to see is you can take data that you didn't have a week ago, operationalize this logically in your environment, and get more value out of these previous investments that you've made. As far as looking ahead, I'll tell you that the federal agencies that I work with, some of them are mandated to share threat data, threat incident data with their sector, if they're a sector-specific agency. Different efforts have been going on for years related to that. One useful tool that they're looking to ramp up those efforts is the AIS program. And several departments are doing that. They've got some safeguards in place around, false positive prevention and things like that. We're helping out on that front. We have three clear goals as far as the road ahead. Number one, we want to be the top distributor of AIS threat indicators. And I think we're well on our way. Over 1,000 customers have this data available now. If you're in ActiveTrust, you've got the key. We've already signed the paperwork on your behalf. If you redistribute it to a third party, then you need to engage the AIS Program Management Office and sign the CRADA. But most of our customers are endpoint consumers of the data. The other good news here is we have been receiving a lot of indicators that are marked watch list, right? NKIC policy watch list. We haven't added those as RPZs because we wanted to be conservative about this and then to kind of step it out. We are going to ahead and do that later this year. We're going to go ahead and add those with a remediation recommendation, allow and log. You can set your DNS firewall settings to remediate that way, so that anything that the U.S. government analysts over at DHS are watching, you can now piggyback off of their watch list using your DNS resolver as the smart orchestrator for that. And again, it's the most secure, flexible, scalable, easiest to use secure DNS resolver. That is, of course, ActiveTrust Cloud. You put DNS security in a comprehensive way everywhere you need, because it's a hybrid deployment model. So you can take advantage of this data comprehensively and not just point it at one section of your network. Goal number 2, we want to be a top contributor to the program. We've contributed tens of thousands of records over the past year, and even more before that. Again, this is about making the program more vibrant, making it a higher quality data source for the community. I'm excited that Infoblox stepped up and led on this. We've got some other ideas as far as what we want to do in terms of contribution. So it makes it a really nice sort of virtuous clearinghouse kind of system. As you can just start getting this data, you don't have to go through all the headaches of, you know, upfront management and where is it going to go and how do I deduplicate it and normalize it and, you know, all the different headaches that are associated with just ingesting raw threat intelligence. The third goal, and this is really what DHS is asking the community. How effective is this data for you? How effective is this program for you? I'm getting that question from them. How shall I answer, right? I'd like to engage in the light of day in our community site, and then see, you know, is there a way we can say, yeah, you can shoot me an email, and I'll consolidate all that feedback. You can engage the program management team over at DHS directly. They want to know, is this working, right? Because that's how these programs grow and thrive, is you have to complete that feedback loop. Now you might sit there and say, well, who has time to write an email to DHS? Isn't there some safe, reliable, automatic way we can close this feedback loop? Something that I would easily set up front, configure, and be done with, maybe come back to periodically to fine tune. Some automatic way to do this? I think there is. I think that method is staring us right in the face in the form of response policy zones. Let me explain. Paul Vixie invented response policy zones kind of with this sort of model in mind. A lot of organizations do sort of a primary, secondary, forwarder configuration with their DNS servers. I'll subscribe to your RPZ. You can subscribe to mine. It's a very open sort of format, if you will. We have customers who share RPZ lists just on a kind of custom basis. We know that's going on. ActiveTrust Tide has a governance module where you can dictate the policy and profile, what goes in the data set, who it goes to. In this soup somewhere, I believe there's an easy automatic way that you can get that telemetry back to DHS to tell them, yes, I had hits on this data set. Now, an objection you might raise is, I don't want it attributed to my organization, right? Well, you understand you have to provide some context. If you're a consumer of data, you don't want to know that just, oh, somebody somewhere had a threat, had a hit against something. You have to provide some context. And so maybe we can to say, yes, share back through a simple RPZ file format, something like that, but no, don't attribute it to me or only attribute it to my sector. Lots of smart people in this industry. I think a lot of these problems are actually solved problems. Where my head is at is I'm just trying to think of using a DNS server as the smart orchestrator for it. So long story short, DHS needs to hear from the community. Is this data working? What else do we need to do, right? So they have a mandate from Congress to make sure that these programs not only survive, but grow and thrive. And so if you're in the private sector, we've got to do our part to make sure that that happens. I want to thank you for your time today. I think this is an important topic. You'll be hearing more about this as we go. Again, we have a lot of different, the breadth of threat classes that are coming in with this data set, the way that our threat intelligence team is decorating the data. It's all helpful. We're trying to make this as easy as possible to consume and utilize. If you have questions or feedback, the contact information is right there, AIS_program at infoblox.com. You'll see more information in our community site. You're welcome to join anytime, of course. And again, we've taken care of the paperwork, no trip to the General Counsel's office. There's no cost for this data. We're not going to charge for it. You can get going quickly. You can search on it as a data set in Dossier. You can download it as a self-replenishing feed in Tide in a variety of formats and put it wherever you want. And you can put it in your DNS resolver. You can do that today. And that's part of what we're trying to do at Infoblox. We have to make cyber threat defense easy. You have to make it automatic. You've got to make it so that these things scale. And that's kind of the purpose behind our ecosystem approach. And it's also a big driving philosophy around ActiveTrust Cloud, so that you can just get this data and get going with it. And it's all about saving you time.